Hello everyone, this is Rama Siva from the Stuttering Mind. I'm the author of Dreaming of Stuttering Freedom, part of the Stuttering Mind book series. Today, it's my great pleasure to be interviewing Michael Wilson. He's a dentist, 41 years old, and he's married with 4 children. He has just joined the Maguire program, and I've spoken to Michael a few times. He's always impressed me with what he has to say. So I first asked Michael how he coped with stuttering as a child, teenager, and adult.
In high school, I was very sensitive about my stutter, late middle school through the end of high school. And I had kind of decided that if it wasn't going to come out right, quote unquote, then I just wasn't going to say it. And I was a pretty severe stutterer, so that meant basically not talking very much at all during high school, and got a few pretty difficult experiences back then we can talk about if you want to. But as far as what changed when I went to college, the guy that ran the speech language pathology program at Florida State, where I went to school, he took an interest in me, and he brought me around campus at Florida State that entire first semester of treatment, quote unquote, and didn't introduce any speech techniques to begin with. That whole first semester, he just brought me around campus, made me talk to people and get used to looking people in the eye when I stuttered. And before that, I didn't realize that people would just sit there and listen. They weren't, when you're looking people in the eye, a very low percentage of people will blatantly be rude to your face. And people are a little nicer in college. They're pretty nice in college. They act more like adults. And in high school, I don't know how people would have been because I didn't show them. So I don't know. I know they can be pretty tough. Kids can be pretty mean in middle school. But yeah, I got to college and started looking people in the eye and started realizing that people were going to be cool, and that it also gave me a certain amount of strength and made me realize that I was equal to people. It's just I had the speech impediment. And that really changed things for me psychologically, where I went from completely being in a shell in high school to the point where my senior year of high school, neither of my 3 best friends happened to be in my lunch period. So I had nobody I was comfortable sitting with. So rather than just find another table and figure it out, I took my lunch into the bathroom stall my entire senior year. So that's kind of how much in the closet I was. I guess you could use that phrase, in the closet. But learning to look people in the eye just 4 months after I was hiding in the bathroom or for lunch, it really changed everything. And I decided at that point that I was going to say what I had to say. And if people had a problem with it, no worries. They could go hang out with somebody else. And don't let the door hit you on the way out. And even though my stutter was still, it did improve the severity of my stutter some, but I didn't know physically how to control it yet at that point. So it didn't improve my actual stuttering events that much as far as the quantity and length of my stuttering, but it did open me up psychologically where I was willing to show it to people, and I didn't think of myself as inferior. I wouldn't have told you I was the world's best speaker because I was aware I had the stutter, but I didn't feel like less of a human being on the inside as soon as I learned to look people in the eye. And that's something that I think instinctually we don't want to do, especially when we're stuttering. We want to look away in shame, right? Or just look away from the awkwardness that we're seeing on other people's face or they're not sure what's happening. But I then realized that you kind of bring people into the experience with you, and they're in there whether they want to be or not. They're in there with you. And most people, the vast majority of people, were nice. Now, some people didn't then want to be friends, but that happens to fluent speakers also. So who knows why some relationships click and others don't. But I never felt like I was without friends or without dignity after that point.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Michael. At what age did you become aware that you stuttered and you started to change and go into the closet, very much like I did?
So I would say in middle school, let's see. I don't know. My parents tell me that I stuttered from the time I started talking when I was 3, I guess, 2 or 3. But I don't remember thinking of it as a problem until I was in middle school and being made fun of about it. And then kind of making the decision that, look, I'm just not going to give people ammunition to make fun of me about. So I just won't talk very much.
So for people not from the US, at what age would you be in middle school?
Okay, sorry. So yeah, about 11 or 12.
Okay, excellent.
So that's 6th or 7th grade,
Mm.
if I'm doing my math right, because kindergarten is age 5. Yeah, so around that, 6th or 7th grade, age 11, 12. So that's when it became something that I had shame over, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And when you were 18, you entered college, and in the first
Right.
semester, you had this professor at the speech and language pathology department who made you go out. Did you want to go out,
Right.
or did he force you?
No, I didn't want, well, I mean, he told me the plan and I was going to follow his lead. I wasn't refusing to do it, certainly, but I didn't want to, and it felt completely awkward to maintain eye contact at first. But then I realized that it totally changed the dynamic, and it probably took 2, 3, 4 hours of doing this, so 2 or 3 or 4 sessions before I really started finding my legs with it and knowing that I could do it. And after that, it really changed everything. So I would even raise my hand in college in huge lecture halls of 200, 300 students, however many were in there, and ask the professor questions. When even 99% of the fluent speakers were not doing that. But I wanted to ask him that question. I was wondering if he had considered whatever it was, him or her. And so, and I had promised myself that I wasn't going to ever not say something just because of my stutter. So once I'd have the thought, I want to ask him this, and then I'd think, oh, but you got the stutter. And then once I had consciously thought of it, I had to then proceed and ask the question. I made myself do it. And so I would stand up and stutter in front of everybody and look from person to person to person and at the professor. And lo and behold, people just let me ask my questions. And then the professor continued as if nothing had happened as far as my stutter, and answered my question. So I realized that the stutter was a much bigger deal in my head, had been, than it was in other people's heads, or at least the way they behaved, what they would show you face to face was very, very rarely not acceptance. Because it's kind of like a person with any sort of physical challenge. I mean, who goes up to people in wheelchairs as adults and starts making fun of them? You know, nobody that's a decent human being does that, right? At least not in the modern world. I can't speak to what it would have been like to have stuttered 200 years ago. Maybe people would have been much more direct and mean as adults, as kids are to some extent. But in the modern world, at least, adults they'll hear you out. And if anything, I felt like people, and maybe I was just making this up, sort of almost a hero narrative in my head, but I felt like people actually would give you, they could see that you had a thing, right? That must be difficult for you. And you were still talking to them anyway. And you weren't somewhere hiding in a corner crying about it. And people respected that, I felt like. And people occasionally would tell me that they respected the fact that I still would speak even with this speech impediment, and that I still was passionate about communicating.
Fantastic, Michael. Thank you. And what age or when did you make that decision to speak your mind and say what you thought, irrespective of the stutter?
When I was 18, when I started looking people in the eye, so not long after, basically it coincided with that same time. So what the eye contact did for me in a short period of time in my life, so you go from senior year of high school, hiding in the bathroom, afraid to even find a different lunch table to sit at. You go from that to the eye contact freshman year of college, which was 4 months later, to later that same year, raising my hand in huge lecture halls, asking questions. So it really happened quick as soon as I started facing the stutter, not running